and welcome back to the channel. This situation is evolving way more rapidly than I thought it would be because I am still wearing the same outfit that we were wearing in the last video because I told you guys that this situation was evolving at a very quick pace, but I did not think it was going to be this quick of a pace, and I did not think it was going to be to this degree because after everybody started talking about the Kids Online Safety Act, it was unveiled that there was another bill that a lot of us weren't aware of titled S737, and it is the Screen Act. And don't let them fool you. You know, it is very similar to the Kids Online Safety Act, but it is a bit different. And I would argue that even though this is a dystopian clusterfuck, no one can argue about that, this is arguably worse, if you want me to be entirely honest. Yeah, this was imposed to the Senate earlier in the year, and this is why talking about things like this is so important, because more gets uncovered and the more that we can do to hopefully try to pump the brakes on whatever dystopia type shit is happening up in here. But I'm not gonna lie to you, it's a lot. There's a lot that we gotta talk about today, so please take just a second to grab your drinks. Please like, subscribe, and share this video if you want to raise awareness, and let's go ahead and get right into it. So the Screen Act, if we go down here, it says it is a bill to require certain interactive computer services to adopt and operate technology verification measures to ensure that users of the platform are not minors and for other purposes. And you're probably thinking, Brani, how is this different? Well, if we look over at the Kids Online Safety Act, it is very similar, because this one, it says a bill to protect the safety of children on the internet. And this is interesting, actually, because now that I look at this, all of this stuff is crossed out, but the covered platforms mean social media services, social networks, etc. But if we look at the true definition of an interactive computer service, it says an interactive computer service broadly encompasses any information service system or access software provider that enables multiple users to access a computer server, most notably included services that provide access to the internet and online platforms that facilitate user interaction with content or other users, such as social media, online forums, and online libraries. And obviously the Kids Online Safety Act, it included social media. So again, you're probably still thinking, how is this any different? The thing is whenever we go to online forums, that could include Reddit, that could include 4chan, which we will talk about a little bit more later in this video, but then online libraries, and a lot of this is so vague, just like the last bill, because online libraries, that could span to anything like Wikipedia, which has already been having problems to begin with. And if we go down to the covered platforms, it says the term covered platform means an entity that is an interactive computer service that is engaged in interstate or foreign commerce or purposely avails itself to the United States market or a portion thereof, and for which it is the regular course of the trade or business of the entity to create, host, or make available content that meets the definition of harmful to minors under paragraph 4, and that is provided by the entity, a user, or other information content provider with the objective of earning a profit. Does that make you think of anything as you're watching this video? Because as I was reading this bill, this scared the living shit out of me, if you want me to be honest. Because if we go back and look at this again, it says for which it is in the regular course of the trade or business of the entity to create, host, or make available content. Does that remind you of anything? YouTube. And you're probably thinking that I'm absolutely batshit crazy, but just wait a second, because it says that meets the definition of harmful to minors under paragraph 4. Again, who necessarily gets to decide what's harmful to minors and who doesn't other than this bill? Crazy. But if we go on down here, it says it includes an entity described in subparagraph A regardless of whether the entity earns a profit on the activities described in subparagraph A, or creating, hosting, or making available content that meets the definition of harmful to minors under paragraph 4 is the sole source of income or principal business of the entity. So it doesn't even matter if all of the content, let's say YouTubers, okay, like me, right? It doesn't matter if, let's say, all of my content is kosher, all of it's great, all of it meets the guidelines, but then there is one video that for some reason I talk about something that they deem harmful to minors, which we talked about in the last video is a very slippery slope, because again, who gets to decide that? Who gets to decide that? You know what I mean? So like we're kind of just we're not good. And again, it's regardless of whether the entity earns a profit on the activities described in some paragraph A. So even for my not monetized people out there, like it doesn't matter. You are still subject to this bill. And it's crazy because under paragraph 4, where it talks about things that are harmful to minors, it says the term harmful to minors with respect to a picture, image, graphic image file, film, videotape, or other visual depiction means that the picture, image, graphic image file, film, videotape, or other depiction taken as a whole with respect to minors appeals to the prurient interest of nudity, sex, or expression. Let's say, okay, like just nudity, for example. But again, we're going to continue on, and it says depicts, describes, or represents in a patently offensive way with respect to what is suitable for minors an actual or simulated sexual act or sexual contact, actual or simulated normal or perverted sexual acts, or lewd exhibition of the genitals, and taken as a whole lacks serious literary, artistic, political, or scientific value as to minors, is obscene, or is child pornography. And see, abso-fucking-lutely, of course, but who gets to decide what is obscene? Who gets to decide if it lacks all of these things that we see here? You know, because something that I deem to be artistic, not everybody is going to deem to be artistic. It's too vague. It is too vague, and I cannot stress the slippery slope that we are on. I talked about this so much during last video, but it is so important to stress that point because a lot of people would look at this on the surface and be like, oh, fuck yeah, protecting the kids. It's not about protecting the kids. And again, we'll get more into that as the video goes on because there is a lot that we have to talk about. But even going down to the technology verification measures, it says, the term technology verification measure means technology that employs a system or process to determine whether it is more likely than not that a user of a covered platform is a minor. Not even for certain. It is just more likely than not, and prevents access by minors to any content on a covered platform. Did you read the same thing that I just read? Prevents access by minors to any content on a covered platform. Not just the sexual content, not the obscene content that it's talking about. No. Any content. And more than likely not. So there's a possibility that based on AI or whatever the hell that they want to use, they can say, oh yeah, like they're a minor, even though you guys can see my face. I'm most definitely not a minor, and then not show me any content on a covered platform. And you know, and like we talked about before, this could very easily, not just social media, not just all these things, but also YouTube. I could be fucked and not be able to view anything on YouTube. And I cannot explain how terrifying that is. And the technology verification measure data, it means information that identifies, is linked to, or is reasonably linkable to an individual or device that identifies, is linked to, or is reasonably linkable to an individual, is collected or processed for the purpose of fulfilling a request by an individual to access any content on a covered platform, which is, I'm going to remind you guys that these covered platforms, it's pretty much anything. Pretty much anything that you're going to look at, and is collected and processed solely for the purpose of utilizing a technology verification measure and meeting the obligations imposed under this act. And the technology verification measures, there are certain requirements on here, but the requirements for age verification measures, it says, in order to comply with the requirement of subsection A, the technology verification measures adopted and utilized by a covered platform shall do the following. Use a technology verification measure in order to verify a user's age, provide that requiring a user to confirm the user is not a minor shall not be sufficient to satisfy the requirement of subsection A, and make publicly available the verification process that the covered platform is employing to comply with the requirements of this act, and subject the IP addresses, including known virtual proxy network IP addresses, of all of the users on a covered platform to the technology verification measure described in paragraph 1, unless the covered platform determines based on available technology that a user is not located within the United States. So pretty much I talked about last video how being anonymous on the internet, if these bills go through, is pretty much dead, you know, and this really solidifies it. Subjecting your IP your IP address. And I talked in the last video about what happened with the T app. And if you guys are just coming to this video and didn't watch the last one, I'm going to go ahead and give you a bit of a refresher. Pretty much what happened was this app called T, you had to take a picture of your ID to prove that like you were a woman, a girl, whatever, send it in, and they said, oh, like we didn't keep a hold of this information. And then everybody got doxxed, you know. So imagine if not only we have to verify our ages with our IDs just to go on the fucking internet, you know, just to look at a recipe on YouTube, okay? Let alone subjecting my IP address. And going back to number 2, it says provide that requiring a user to confirm that the user is not a minor shall not be sufficient to satisfy the requirement of subsection A. So for those of us, you know, for those of us that like to smoke a little bit of the green, you know, the websites that you go on to, you know, shop around or look what deals to say that they have, a lot of them will be like, yes, I'm 21 and older, or leave. Specific to this one. I'm not gonna say it because I'm not gonna get into that, and I don't want YouTube to kind of like put down the ban hammer on me. However, saying like, no, I'm not a minor, or like, yes, I'm above this age, that's not going to be sufficient. How terrifying is that? So not only is the government going to be able to see what you're doing, when you're doing it, and who's doing it exactly, but also what you're buying, potentially, what you're looking at. And especially with the Steam and itch stuff, it's already weaseled its way into controlling how we spend our money. And the choice of verification measures, it says a covered platform may choose the specific technology verification measures to employ for purposes of complying with subsection A, provided that the technology verification measure employed by the covered platform meets the requirements of subsection B and prohibits a minor from accessing the platform or any information on the platform that is obscene, child pornography, or harmful to minors. And I think it's so interesting here that all of these other like middle points just talked about any content, and now here it's like, oh, that is obscene, for example. Like obviously these two, you know, like I think it's important that there is some safety measures for children, okay, but this should be up to the parents. And I'm just going to go ahead and give a bit of a hot take here. Parents, I don't care. They do not do a good enough job of watching what their kids do on the internet. And I understand that, like, you can't watch your child's every move on the internet, no, especially with how broad and diverse the internet is. However, if you cannot protect your child from the things that you want them to see on the internet, don't let them on the internet. Plain as simple as that. Do not let them on the internet. Like, I don't understand how difficult that is. And I mean, like, I know there's a bit of nuance to that, so please take that with a grain of salt, because I understand like things with school, because a lot of schools are really utilizing, you know, things like laptops and Chromebooks and iPads and being online. So for things like that, there is a little bit of a gray area, you know, but I'm sure that a lot of you that read in between the lines know what I'm trying to say and what point I'm trying to get across whenever I say that. And one of the crazy things that I talked about last video was the use of third parties, because it talked about this in the Kids Online Safety Act, but here it says a covered platform may contract with a third party to employ technology verification measures for purposes of complying with subsection A, but the use of such a third party shall not relieve the covered platform of its obligations under this act or from liability under this act. So again, I don't have to stress why we should not use third parties for this, you know, especially with everything that happened with the T app. Like, it's not smart. It's not smart by any means, because there is so much room for error and so much room for people to get their information just straight stolen, you know. And I made this point in the last video, and I'm going to make it again. If the government really was like so set on protecting these children, and really like that was the goal here, wouldn't you want the verification measures to be through the government? You know, like, wouldn't you want everyone's information to be stored in the government? Because it's like, oh yeah, like, we don't want to risk anybody getting doxxed or anything like that, because especially these children who have to verify their ages and stuff, because if these kids' information is stalked, you know, identity theft, etc., and you would think that they would put so much time and care into this, and they're not. They're just not. And it's crazy. And that's really one of the main ways that you can tell, other than everything else that we talked about in last video and now, that it is not about protecting the kids. It is simply not about protecting the kids. And even piggybacking off of that point, going to section E, it says rule of construction. Nothing in this section shall be construed to require a covered platform to submit to the commission any information that identifies as linked to or is reasonably linkable to a user of the covered platform, or a device that identifies as linked to or is reasonably linkable to a user of the covered platform. So again, if it's through these third-party providers, you know, and the government really wants to protect the children, why wouldn't they want access to that information that tells them, you know, like, this person's a minor, this person's a minor, this person's not? Like, it's not making sense. And to go on, it says the technology verification measure data security. A covered platform shall establish, implement, and maintain reasonable data security to protect the confidentiality, integrity, and accessibility of technology verification measure data collected by the covered platform or a third party employed by the covered platform, protect such technology verification measure data against unauthorized access, and retain the technology verification measure data for no longer than is reasonably necessary to utilize a technology verification measure or what is minimally necessary to demonstrate compliance with the obligations under this act. And I hate that I keep linking it back to this point, but you know, they said, hey, we don't like hold on to this information, you know. So if you go on to a new, like, whether it's social media, let's say Instagram, you go onto Instagram, there's this new policy and it's like, hey, we have to verify your information, send in your ID, whatever, and you do so, and then they say, like, in their terms and conditions, like, oh, we won't keep this for like longer than we have to, or like, we don't store it, whatever. This is proof that not everything that's under these terms and conditions, like, I'm gonna pull a house here for a second, everybody lies. Everybody lies. And I know that by talking about this stuff, I might sound like a little bit of a conspiracy theorist with my tinfoil hat on, but at this point though, and I stressed this in the last video, I don't care if it seems like I have a tinfoil hat on, if I am raising awareness and hopefully slowing down this mass censorship that's under the guise of protecting children. Because if you put it under that guise, you can convince almost anyone that it's for the sake of good. Because there was actually an article that says, Minister must apologize over Savile claims, says Farage. Nigel Farage has urged Technology Secretary Peter Kyle to do the right thing and apologize after he suggested that by opposing the government's online safety law, the Reform UK leader was on the side of sex offenders like Jimmy Savile. And seriously, that is what they are painting this as. You know, like, if we go back to talking about Collective Shout, oh my god, the organization that really started this slippery slope into everything. If you went on to, like, there was a section in our last video where I read one of the subsections of their website, and they were talking about how people were backlashing against them. And there were a lot of people who were being misogynistic and who were being assholes, but they're taking all of these pictures and they're pointing it like, yeah, everyone that's against this is like some misogynistic, like, piece of shit, you know, when that's not what's happening. You know, they are gaslighting you into thinking that you are a bad person for not wanting censorship. You know, and like I said, I will be the first one to say that there needs to be more online safety awareness for children, because there simply is not enough. There simply is not enough. But that is not what this is about. And there was actually a tweet that I had found that says, it has always been about censorship and stopping free speech. Barry Gardner apparently said the quiet part out loud, so I'm just going to play this so we can watch it together.
Is it just about children, or does it focus on adults?
Do you think that should be an elite squad?
Barry, does it just focus...
To protect 13-year-old
I'm sorry,
girls?
the elite squad is not about children, actually. Shall I read you the thing? An elite squad of police officers is to monitor social media for anti-migrant sentiment. I don't think 13-year-olds are engaging that. So is it also to monitor adults? Simple question, yes or no?
Yes, of course it will.
Okay, there we go.
And that is all you needed to hear. Props to this interviewer for grilling him about this, because I feel that that's really important. And also, I'm going to put the screenshot up here on screen, probably onto my left. Let me find it, because it says the kinds of illegal content and activity that platforms need to protect users from set out on the act, and this includes content relating to child sexual abuse, controlling or coercive behavior, extreme sexual violence, extreme pornography, fraud, racially or religious aggravated public order offenses, inciting violence, which is great. And even going down to promoting or facilitating suicide, intimate image abuse, but also it includes illegal immigration and people smuggling. So with everything going on in the world right now, I don't think that that's a coincidence, that that's something that they would want to censor. But even going back to gaming, because this is where it all started for the channel. That's why I started talking about it to begin with. Games like GTA 6 that are about to come out. It has a lot of those. It has a lot of those things. So games like that probably won't even, can you imagine? Games like that might not even be allowed to be released. It might not even be allowed to be released, which is actually insane to me. And I know going back to this, it said interactive computer platforms, if I'm not mistaken. That was the words that they used. Hold on. Interactive computer services. There we go. Because then I said that this could very easily include YouTube. And a lot of you are probably on the same page with me after explaining this to you, but if you need a little bit of a kick in the pants, YouTube will start automatically identifying teen accounts using AI. Starting August 13th, 2025, YouTube will implement an improved AI model that will automatically identify user accounts under the age of 18. The account age and user activity will be taken into account, after which appropriate restrictions will be applied to minors. These restrictions include blocking age-restrictive videos, showing only non-personalized ads, reminding you to take a break, and limiting repeat recommendations on sensitive topics, including body image. In addition, minors will automatically be shown privacy reminders when commenting or uploading videos. Again, and I'm going to go ahead and stress the point, sensitive topics. Who decides what sensitive topics are? And also, we all know, especially for those of us that create content over here on YouTube, that YouTube's AI model isn't great. It's not great to begin with. The amount of fellow creators and also myself who have gotten false copyright claims and stuff like that because, or you can't monetize a video because the AI said, oh, you did this thing in your video when you didn't. It happens all the time. It happens all the time. So what makes you think, or what makes them think, rather, or what makes you think, if for some reason you don't agree with me when you're watching this, and that's totally okay, that happens, that the AI would be accurate or that it would be effective in doing this? And the fact that it's just blocking videos. And my thing is why are we identifying teen accounts, number one, using AI? I get that AI supposedly makes a lot of things easier, but that doesn't mean that it's not subject to error. And also, isn't there YouTube Kids for a reason? I mean, what the fuck is the point of YouTube Kids if we start doing this? And who's to say that AI won't say that my account is a minor or a teenage account and then I get blocked? Like I talked about earlier, nothing is stopping that. And I do actually, even though that this is terrifying, and I hate to be giving bad news because I don't want to be part of y'all's daily doom scroll, but it's something that I feel that more people really need to be talking about. But there is, thank God, some good news. There was an article by the Polygon titled, "Visa and MasterCard are getting overwhelmed by gamer fury over censorship. Gamers are sending mass emails and phone calls to major payment processors in protest over Steam and itch.io. In the wake of storefronts like Steam and itch.io curbing the sale of adult games, irate fans have started an organized campaign against the payment processors that they believe are responsible for the crackdown." Because over on 4chan, and I'm not a fan of 4chan, but it is a social platform where people come together, and they started Operation Fight Fire with Fire, and essentially taking the collective shout approach and really overwhelming these payment processors and saying, hey, we don't like our games being censored, actually. And, as long as people are doing this in a, I don't want to say calm, chill manner, but as long as you're not threatening people, and you're not trying to dox people and all that stuff, please do that. And if you are in the U.S. especially, I'm going to urge y'all to call your local senator. Call these people and tell them, hey, I do not like this bill. I do not want it passed. And look, be on the phone with them for a while. Call them multiple times if you have to. Tell them why. Tell them with your whole chest why you don't want this stuff to be passed. Because even though there's an argument that no matter what we do, it won't make a difference. Even if it doesn't, at least we can annoy the hell out of them. And I feel like that's something. Something in this case is better than nothing. And for now, unfortunately, that is all I got. You know, I wish there was more that I could say, more good news that I could say, and I have a feeling that there's going to be more within the coming days, so please stay tuned for that. And if you guys liked what we talked about today and liked the conversation that we had together, please be sure to like and subscribe and maybe watch another video to spend more time with your girl. And I will see y'all next time. Bye, guys.